London, 1819. Rain drummed against the tall windows of the Kingsley Library like impatient fingers tapping on the door of a secret. Lady Ophelia Kingsley watched the droplets slide down the glass, each carrying a distorted reflection of the chandeliers glittering in the grand hall, where her mother entertained the afternoon visitors. Women who measured reputations as if weighing gold and judged with the precision of executioners. She wasn't there. She was here, surrounded by volumes of philosophy and economy, ink smudged on her fingertip, and 3 coded letters hidden beneath the blotter. Letters no perfect lady should ever write. Letters no diamond of the season should even understand. The clock struck 4. In 6 hours, Lady Ophelia Kingsley would cease to exist. In her place, a new woman would rise, Madame Scarlet, the masked figure no one in London knew by face, but every soul who frequented the Scarlet Veil feared and respected. The faceless woman who ruled the most dangerous club in the city, where secrets were worth more than gold, and identities stayed buried behind silk and shadow. She sealed the final letter with crimson wax, not the Kingsley crest, but a symbol known only to her messengers. Then she smiled, not the sweet smile she wore at the balls, but one sharpened like a blade, hidden behind a mask no one had ever pierced. Lady Ophelia Kingsley was everything London society demanded a woman to be. Beautiful, educated, wealthy, and untouchable. At 27, she had already declined 17 marriage proposals, politely, of course, with the grace her position required. The daughter of the Earl of Kingsley, she owned a personal fortune rivaling that of dukes, an intellect that unsettled scholars, and a reputation so pristine it sparkled like crystal in the sun. But even crystal, no matter how flawless it appears, hides its cracks. At night, while London slept beneath its fog and morality, Ophelia would slip through the servants' corridor, trade her silks for plain garments, and cross the city to an address absent from every official map. There, behind a velvet mask of scarlet that she never removed in the presence of others, she became Madame Scarlet, the phantom owner of the most exclusive and perilous club in all of London. At the Scarlet Veil, everyone wore a mask. Lords gambled away fortunes without revealing their faces. Duchesses traded secrets under cascades of silk. And the true identity of the woman who ruled this empire of shadows remained the greatest mystery of them all. Not even her most loyal patrons knew who she was. Not even her servants had ever seen her face. Madame Scarlet was a voice, a presence, a power without a shape, and she had to remain that way. No one knew. Not her 3 sisters, Victoria and Amelia, comfortably married, nor Juliana, still hopeful at 23. Not her parents, who saw only the perfect daughter. And certainly not the gentleman who vied for her hand at glittering balls, unaware that the immaculate lady who waltzed beneath the chandeliers was also the hidden queen of London's forbidden underworld. But secrets, no matter how well guarded, always find those who seek them. And when the Duke of Ravenscroft, the most charming and dangerously perceptive man in all of London, stepped through the doors of the Scarlet Veil for the first time, wearing a knowing smile and eyes that saw too much, Ophelia felt something she never had before. Fear. Not of him, but of the possibility that someone at last might strip away her mask, and with it, destroy everything she had built. If you too believe that even the best-kept secrets deserve to be uncovered, tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your country, your refuge. I want to know how far this story travels. And before the next chapter begins, subscribe, because some secrets are only revealed to those who stay until the end. Chapter 1. The Weight of Perfection. The Rutherford ball shimmered with crystal laughter and calculated conversation, yet Ophelia felt silence the way one feels cold, not on the skin, but deep within the bones. She glided among the guests with her usual grace, smiling at compliments she could recite by heart, accepting flattery that all blurred into the same hollow tune. "Lady Ophelia, you are radiant tonight." "Lady Kingsley, your beauty rivals the stars themselves." Empty words, spoken by men who desired her fortune far more than they desired to know her. Her fingers tightened around the champagne glass until the chill of the crystal pressed sharply against her palm, a reminder that at least something tonight was real. Everything else, the smiles, the curtsies, the admiration reflected in other people's eyes, felt like painted paper over a cracked wall. At 27, Ophelia Kingsley possessed everything a woman could wish for: beauty that silenced rooms, wealth that stirred envy, a family of standing, and a reputation so flawless it glittered like frost beneath candlelight. And yet when she closed her eyes at night, she saw only emptiness. "Lady Ophelia, would you honor me with this dance?" She turned. Lord Holloway, golden hair, blue eyes, confident smile. "Another one." There was always another one. She inclined her head gracefully and let him lead her to the ballroom floor. Her feet knew the waltz by heart. Her body moved with mechanical perfection while her mind drifted far away, to a world that would soon belong to her again. 6 hours. Only 6 hours until she could shed the ivory satin gown for the dark attire she wore at the Scarlet Veil. 6 hours until she could be who she truly was. Not the flawless lady society adored, but the woman who had built an empire in the shadows. There, she was not measured by beauty or birth, but by intellect, cunning, and the power to read men as easily as others read books. "You seem distant tonight, Lady Ophelia." Lord Holloway's voice pulled her back. She adjusted her smile, not too warm, not too cool. "Merely admiring the decor, Lord Holloway. Lady Rutherford always displays impeccable taste." He appeared content with the shallow answer. Of course he did. None of them sought depth. They wanted the Ophelia that existed in portraits and gossip, the perfect heiress who would one day choose one of them to adorn with her name and fortune. They did not wish to know the thoughts that kept her awake, the ambitions that burned quietly behind her polite eyes, the secrets she held like embers cupped in her palms. The waltz ended. She curtsied, murmured polite thanks, and slipped away onto the terrace. The May night carried the fragrance of jasmine, and something else. That peculiar scent that belonged only to London, a mingling of coal smoke, the Thames, and 1,000 intertwined destinies. Resting her hands on the cold stone balustrade, Ophelia allowed herself, just for a moment, to remove the invisible mask. She was tired. Not of duplicity, that paradoxically gave her life, but of the loneliness that came with it. Her sisters had their husbands, their homes, their simple, unguarded joys. Victoria laughed easily at family dinners. Amelia blushed whenever her husband looked at her. Even Juliana, still unmarried, carried the soft faith that love would someday come wrapped in sincerity. Ophelia had none of that. She had power, wealth, influence, and a void the size of London within her chest. A faint sound behind her made her body tense. She composed her expression before turning, prepared to face some wandering gentleman seeking privacy or scandal. But the terrace was empty. Only the velvet curtains stirred with the breeze. Beyond them, the ballroom glittered on, her perfect life continuing without her. Ophelia looked down at her hands, delicate, manicured, adorned with rings worth more than some families earned in a year. Hands that signed secret contracts, that sealed coded letters, that built and broke reputations with a single gesture. Hands that still trembled with loneliness when no one was watching. The night wind carried laughter from inside, light, carefree, unmasked. The laughter of people who did not need to hide half of themselves to be accepted. She closed her eyes and imagined, for just one fragile moment, what it would feel like to be free. Free from judgment, free from expectation, free from the golden chains of perfection. When she opened her eyes, her reflection stared back from the dark glass, Lady Ophelia Kingsley, the diamond of the season, beautiful, wealthy, admired, and utterly, devastatingly alone. But in less than 6 hours, she would be Madame Scarlet again, and perhaps, among the whispers and wagers, she might find something that resembled belonging. Or perhaps it would only be another form of loneliness, one dressed in darker clothes. Chapter 2. The Man Who Saw Through Masks. Alexander Harrington observed the Rutherford ballroom with the cultivated indifference of a man who had watched the same play 1,000 times. The same actors, the same lines, the same polished smiles, mothers nudging their daughters toward him as if pushing pawns across a chessboard, gentlemen measuring him with barely veiled envy, ladies whispering behind their fans, wondering when the Duke of Ravenscroft would finally choose a wife. At 32, he was supposed to have done it already, married, produced heirs, fulfilled his duty. His mother reminded him of that weekly, with the subtlety of a hammer striking an anvil. But Alexander could not bring himself to choose among women who looked at him not as a man, but as a prize, desirable only for the title he carried. So he did what he did best. He smiled, he charmed, he evaded. And he watched. That was when he saw her. Lady Ophelia Kingsley moved through the room as one might cross a field of hidden traps. Every step measured, every smile calculated, every word weighed before being spoken. She was beautiful, of course. Even the blind in London knew that. But it wasn't her beauty that caught his attention. It was the faint fracture in her flawless armor, so subtle that only someone accustomed to watching people unravel could have noticed it. He saw her decline Lord Harlow with genuine-seeming grace that wasn't real, saw her fingers tighten around the champagne glass when Lady Rothmore murmured something sweet and venomous. He noticed the precise moment she slipped away to the terrace, shedding her social mask with the quiet relief of someone finally allowed to breathe. Curious. Alexander was not like the others who sought her favor. He didn't want her fortune. He had his own. He didn't need her name to validate his. Ravenscroft was one of England's oldest dukedoms. And as for beauty, London had no shortage of beautiful women. But interesting ones. Those were rarer than true diamonds. And Lady Ophelia Kingsley, he suspected, was far more interesting than she pretended to be. He followed her onto the terrace, not as a predator stalks prey, but as a scholar follows an enigma. He lingered in the shadows, watching her clutch the balustrade as if it were the only solid thing in a world collapsing around her. He saw the mask fall completely, revealing not fragility, but something far more dangerous. Depth. She wasn't a porcelain doll to be admired. She was a fortress disguised as a palace. Fascinating, he murmured under his breath. Then, deliberately, he made a sound. She turned swiftly, faster than he expected, composing herself before the movement was even complete. When her eyes found his in the dim light, Alexander caught a spark there. Not fear, but caution. The kind carried by those who have learned that danger doesn't always wear armor. He stepped from the shadows, allowing the ballroom's glow to reach his face. "Forgive the intrusion, Lady Kingsley. You seemed in need of a quiet moment, so I kept a respectful distance, Your Grace." She inclined her head. Courteous, cool, perfect. "I hadn't realized you followed me." Followed is a rather harsh word. He moved closer to the balustrade, keeping a proper distance, but close enough to study her more clearly. "Let's say I noticed your departure and grew concerned for your well-being." "How gallant," she said, with not a trace of sincerity. "And why, pray, would a duke concern himself with my well-being?" "For the same reason, I imagine," he replied, "that a diamond flees to an empty terrace." He smiled, not the polished social smile, but something quieter, more genuine. Self-preservation. Her gaze sharpened, assessing him with the kind of precision most men never noticed. Where others blushed or flattered, Lady Ophelia simply studied, as if deciding whether he was a threat or merely an inconvenience. "Self-preservation," she repeated, tasting the word. "Curious choice for a man in your position. And what position would that be according to you? Enviable, powerful, free, free." Alexander laughed, softly without joy. "Lady Kingsley, if there's one thing a duke never is, it's free. We are prisoners of our own golden chains, much like diamonds, I suspect." Something flickered across her expression. Not softness. Lady Ophelia, he realized, was not a woman who softened easily. But recognition, as though, for the briefest instant, she had seen truth in his words, and allowed the fortress to show its windows. So we are both prisoners pretending to be free, she said evenly. What a comforting thought, Your Grace. Alexander? The word slipped out before he could stop it. When two souls share melancholic truths on a terrace, I believe titles become unnecessary. Melancholic truths. She almost smiled. Almost. And what makes you think I've shared any truth at all? Because, Lady Ophelia, he leaned slightly forward, keeping his gaze fixed on hers, I recognize a mask when I see one. And yours, flawless as it is, shows cracks to those who know where to look. The silence that followed was thick as London fog. She studied him with unsettling calm, dissecting, cataloging, reading him in ways he wasn't used to being read. Those eyes, praised by every poet and painter, were not merely beautiful. They were dangerous. They saw too much, and hid even more. Careful, Your Grace, she said at last, her voice soft as silk and sharp as glass. Those who go searching for cracks in other people's masks often discover their own aren't quite as solid as they imagined. And with that, she passed by him, leaving behind only the scent of jasmine and something darker. Something that smelled like danger and defiance. Alexander remained alone on the terrace, a slow, genuine smile curving his lips for the first time in months. She was utterly fascinating. And he realized, with a spark of reluctant wonder, that he wanted to uncover the mystery Lady Ophelia Kingsley guarded so well. Chapter 3. The Stranger in Black. The Scarlet Veil never slept. Even at 2 a.m, when respectable London had long surrendered to its pillows, the club thrummed with life. Or rather, with secrets dressed in silk and deception. Ophelia moved through the grand hall with the quiet authority of a woman who ruled every inch of this clandestine empire. Her scarlet velvet mask covered her face from brow to nose, leaving only her lips and chin visible. Everyone here wore masks. It was the rule, absolute, unbreakable. At the Scarlet Veil, identity meant nothing. Only power, money, and secrets. Madame Scarlet. Thomas, her floor manager, a discreet man in his 50s who had never once asked who she truly was, bowed slightly. Lord M requests a private audience. He claims to have information regarding the matter you mentioned last week. Ophelia nodded. Lord M, of course she knew who he was. She knew the identity of every regular patron, though they all believed themselves safely hidden behind anonymity. Knowledge was power, and she collected both as other women collected jewels. Private room 3, she said. 5 minutes? She lingered, observing. There. A viscount betting the mortgage of his country estate against intelligence on his political rival. Across the room, a duchess discreetly purchasing compromising letters written by her younger sister. In the farthest corner, 3 lords gambling away sums that could feed an entire family for years, and all of them, absolutely all, wore masks that turned familiar faces into fascinating strangers. It was perfect. It was dangerous. It was hers. She ascended the staircase toward the private rooms, and felt it. Not something she could see. Something primal. Instinct. The unmistakable awareness of being watched. Ophelia stopped mid-step, turned slowly, her eyes sweeping the crowd with trained precision. There was someone new. Leaning against a marble column, dressed entirely in black, wearing a Venetian mask that hid the upper half of his face, he wasn't drinking. He wasn't playing. He was simply watching. And though she couldn't clearly see his eyes beneath the flickering candlelight, Ophelia knew, with the kind of certainty that chills the blood, that he was watching her. Her pulse quickened. Not from fear. From instinct. Who was he? Not a regular. She knew them all by heart. An investigator? Impossible. The Scarlet Veil was impenetrable, layered in protections, codes, and loyalty bought at high prices. No one entered without approval, references, and the kind of payment that ensured silence. Then why did every nerve in her body whisper danger? She forced herself to continue climbing, posture steady, mask of calm perfectly intact. She would not let him see that he had unsettled her. But when she reached the landing and dared one final glance below, he was gone. The meeting with Lord M was brief and profitable. Information on a fraud scheme involving 3 members of Parliament. Knowledge she could sell for obscene amounts or hold as leverage when the time was right. Yet through the entire exchange, part of her mind remained on the man in black, the stranger who had looked at her as though he could see through velvet and bone alike. When she returned to the main floor, he was there again. This time seated at one of the gaming tables, apparently absorbed in a game of 21. But Ophelia knew better. He wasn't there for the cards. He was there for her. She leaned slightly toward Thomas, her tone soft but sharp enough to slice through the hum of conversation. "The gentleman in the Venetian mask," she murmured, dressed in black, seated at the back table. "Who introduced him?" Thomas glanced discreetly at his small leather register, the book that never left his pocket. "Lord Whitfield, madame. 3 days ago. Full payment in advance, flawless references." Whitfield. She knew him, an aging lord, harmless, infrequent visitor. But who, in God's name, had he brought into her club? "Name?" she asked, voice cool. "Lord Adrian Vaughan, madame. Newly arrived from Scotland, according to Lord Whitfield. Heir to estates in the Highlands." Adrian Vaughan. She knew of no Vaughan wealthy enough to afford the Vale's entrance fees. Scotland was vast, yes, full of forgotten families and fading titles. Possible, yet far too convenient. "Verify the references again," she ordered quietly. "I want everything about this Lord Vaughan by tomorrow night." Ophelia watched him play for several minutes. His movements were deliberate, calculated. He won without triumph, lost without irritation. He spoke little. Even masked, there was something disturbingly familiar in the way he tilted his head while thinking. The faint curve of his lips when someone made a bold move. Then he looked at her. For 3 heartbeats too long. Their gazes locked, and he smiled, not a seductive smile. Not a threatening one. Something worse, a smile of recognition. Impossible. She wore a mask. Her hair was pinned differently than in society. Her gowns here were nothing like the ones she wore at the balls. There was no way he could know, but that smile told her he knew something. And that, Ophelia realized with chilling clarity, was far more dangerous than any open threat. She turned and walked away, not quickly, not slowly, and slipped into her private office, locking the heavy door behind her. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Who was Lord Adrian Vaughan? And why, after 5 years ruling London's most secret empire, did Lady Ophelia Kingsley suddenly feel that her mask might no longer be enough? Chapter 4. The Duke's Game. Alexander Harrington had never thought of himself as a man of vice. He did not drink excessively, did not gamble recklessly, did not pursue married women, nor ruin reputations for sport. But he did possess one addiction few in high society could understand: boredom. A lethal, suffocating kind of boredom, the sort that drives a duke to seek entertainment in the most improbable corners of London, like the Scarlet Vale. He had heard whispers of the club for years, fragments of conversations that ended abruptly when he entered a room, knowing glances exchanged between lords during dull dinners, vague references to a place where society's rules did not apply. It had taken him 3 months to secure an introduction through Whitfield, an old acquaintance who owed him a rather considerable favor. And now, finally, he was here, and he was utterly fascinated, not by the gambling, though it was bold in its extravagance, not by the trading of secrets in dark corners, though that too held its temptations, but by her, Madame Scarlet. He had watched her from the moment he stepped into the hall. It was impossible not to. She moved through the club like a queen in her own dominion, aware of every glance, every whisper, every subtle change in the air. Her scarlet mask concealed her face, yet it could not hide the sharp intelligence in her eyes, nor the way power seemed to bend instinctively around her. She was power, embodied. And Alexander, to his surprise, found that intoxicating. He played a few hands of 21, won a modest sum, observed the other players with detached curiosity. But his true attention never wavered from her. The way she ascended the stairs with absolute confidence. The way powerful men who ruled estates and commanded armies, lowered their heads when she passed. The soft yet unyielding tone in her voice when she gave orders to her manager. Who was this woman? Not that her name mattered. In the Scarlet Veil, names were illusions and masks were the only truths. But Alexander had always been skilled at reading people, and Madame Scarlet was a book written in a code so intricate that the challenge of deciphering her felt almost divine. When she looked down at him from the staircase, he had felt it, the weight of her gaze like a physical touch. She was studying him, measuring him, deciding whether he was a threat or merely another bored aristocrat chasing forbidden amusement. So he did what he always did when he wanted to be noticed. He smiled, not the charming smile that melted hearts at balls. Something truer, sharper. A smile that said, "I see you watching me." She disappeared soon after, retreating to some private meeting beyond his reach. But when she returned and glanced toward her manager, Alexander didn't need to hear their words to know she was asking about him. Her body language was eloquent enough. Her posture, usually relaxed, had stiffened ever so slightly. Her fingers drummed faintly against her skirt, an almost imperceptible rhythm that betrayed what her face tried to hide. And that look, calculated, assessing, thrown his way only when she thought he wasn't watching, said more than any spoken word could. Alexander knew how to read people. He recognized unease beneath poise, curiosity beneath caution. She was disturbed by his presence. Good, at least there was some justice in it. Because he, too, was deeply unsettled by hers, though for reasons entirely different. He played a few more rounds, pocketed a respectable sum, and then, deliberately, looked straight at her, held her gaze, let her see that he was aware of her scrutiny, and smiled again, this time with genuine amusement. Recognition. He wanted her to know that he saw her not merely as the mistress of this clandestine realm, but as an opponent. An equal. Moments later, she turned and left the main hall. Not in haste, Madame Scarlet would never hurry, but with a carefully measured urgency. Alexander's smile widened as he leaned back in his chair, alone now with his cards and his thoughts. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. He wasn't sure what had truly drawn him to the Scarlet Veil. Curiosity, boredom, or a desperate search for something real in a city built on facades. But he knew what would bring him back. Her. That woman who ruled an empire of secrets, who hid behind scarlet velvet, and who clearly despised being the object of someone else's focused attention. "Another round, my lord." The dealer interrupted. Alexander glanced at his cards, then at the door where she had vanished. A slow smile curved his lips. "Not tonight," he said softly. "But I'll be back. You can count on that." He rose, adjusted his Venetian mask, and began walking toward the exit. But before leaving, he cast one final look upward, toward the private offices where amber light glowed through carved wood and stained glass. She was up there. He could feel it. Probably already setting her little web in motion, trying to uncover who Lord Adrian Vaughan truly was. He would let her search. It would be entertaining to see how far her network reached. And when she finally discovered that Adrian Vaughan was as false as the mask he wore, well, that would be the moment worth waiting for. Because Alexander Harrington, Duke of Ravenscroft, had just found the only game in London worth playing, and the woman sitting across the board was, without question, the most intriguing opponent he had ever met. Chapter 5. The Conversation Behind the Mask. 3 days. 3 days of meticulous investigation, and Ophelia had found absolutely nothing. No records that confirmed or denied the existence of Lord Adrian Vaughan. Only vague traces. An old family name from Inverness. Modest Highland properties. Nothing remarkable. But nothing concrete either. It was as if the man had stepped straight out of the Scottish mist for the sole purpose of disturbing her peace. And he did disturb it, because he had returned. Every night since that first encounter, Lord Adrian Vaughan had crossed the threshold of the Scarlet Veil, always immaculate, always wearing that Venetian mask, always watching her with a kind of focus that made her feel both exposed and challenged. He wasn't like the others. He didn't gamble heavily. He didn't buy or sell secrets. He didn't seek pleasure or scandal. He simply observed. Occasionally he spoke, with a wit sharp enough to make even the most jaded lords pause in respect. He won modestly, lost without care. But his gaze, that deliberate, unwavering gaze, studied her as though she were a puzzle built purely for his amusement. It was infuriating. And in the quiet hours before dawn, Ophelia admitted only to herself, a little thrilling. That night, she decided to confront him. Not as the distant, untouchable Madame Scarlet, but directly. She descended into the grand hall with renewed resolve, found him at his usual table, and approached with calm precision. "Lord Vaughan," she said, her voice composed, authoritative. "Might I have a word with you, in private?" He looked up from his cards, surprise flickering briefly before satisfaction took its place. "Madame Scarlet," he said smoothly. "It would be an honor." He rose, excused himself from the table, and followed her into one of the smaller private rooms, those reserved for conversations, not transactions. When the door closed, silence fell thick as fog between them. "You've been coming here every night," she began without preamble. "You don't gamble seriously. You don't engage in our services. So tell me, Lord Vaughan, what exactly are you looking for at the Scarlet Veil?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her with that same unnerving composure. "Perhaps I'm merely bored with polite London society," he said lightly. "I believe you know the feeling. Don't treat me as you do the others." Her tone sharpened, low but firm. She took a step closer. "I know when someone is hunting for something, or someone, and you, Lord Vaughan, are hunting." For a long moment he said nothing, simply regarded her with a focus that made her pulse quicken in defiance of her will. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not mockingly, but softly, almost in admiration. "You are extraordinary," he said at last. "Most people see only what they wish to see, but you see what is truly there, don't you? Beneath the masks, the polite lies, the carefully staged performances." "Answer the question," she said, ignoring the strange warmth his words sparked. "Very well." He stepped closer, not threateningly, but with a quiet honesty that unsettled her far more than arrogance ever could. "I'm here because at last I found someone interesting in London. Someone who doesn't pretend to be less intelligent than she is. Someone who has built something extraordinary and dangerous and does not apologize for it." He paused. "I'm here because of you, Madame Scarlet." Her heart missed a beat, not from fear, but something far more complicated, a pulse of awareness, of danger and recognition. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to. Not your name, if you prefer it hidden, not your history, if it must remain secret, but the mind behind those eyes, the woman who rules this empire with an iron hand wrapped in velvet." She should have been furious. She should have dismissed him, ordered him out, barred him forever from the veil. But something in the raw sincerity of his words disarmed her. "Why?" she heard herself ask. "Why me?" "Because," he said quietly, "I'm tired of empty games and shallow conversations, and I suspect you are too. We're both prisoners of our own creations, I of my position and you of this place. Both of us hiding behind masks, looking for something real in a city built on illusion." His words struck something deep within her, something dangerously familiar. The same hollow ache Lady Ophelia Kingsley felt every time she smiled politely at a ball. The same quiet emptiness. Madame Scarlet buried beneath layers of control and distance. Loneliness. The particular loneliness of being seen, but never known. "You speak as if you understand me," she said softly now. her defenses bending just slightly. "You speak as if you understand me," she said softly now, her defenses bending just slightly. "Perhaps I do," he replied. "Or perhaps I simply recognize someone wearing the same kind of mask I wear, even when both our faces are already hidden." The silence that followed was different this time. Not sharp with tension, but heavy with possibility. Ophelia looked at him, at Lord Adrian Vaughan, or whatever his real name was, and for the first time in years considered lowering her guard. Not entirely, never entirely, but enough to let someone see the cracks. "One conversation," she said finally. "You may come here, play your modest games, and if our paths cross we will speak. But do not seek more than that, Lord Vaughan. Do not seek to know me beyond what I choose to show." He smiled, that infuriating, half-mocking, half-genuine smile she was beginning to recognize. "For now, Madame Scarlet," he said, "a conversation is more than I hoped for." She inclined her head and left the room, her composure intact. But as she walked down the corridor toward her private office, Ophelia realized her hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, not from anger, but from something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Anticipation. Chapter 6. The suspicion Alexander knew he was playing with fire. Worse, he knew he was enjoying it. The past week had been a strange, perilous duality. By day, he was the Duke of Ravenscroft, performing his social duties with the well-rehearsed charm of a man who'd long ago mastered the art of pretending to care. Tedious dinners, rides through Hyde Park, endless conversations at White's, smiling politely at ambitious mothers, who pushed their daughters toward him like prized merchandise on auction, the usual. Predictable, suffocating. But at night, he became Lord Adrian Vaughan and stepped into another world entirely. A world where he spoke with an extraordinary woman who challenged his mind in ways no one else ever had. A woman who neither wanted his title nor his fortune, who barely tolerated his presence, yet, he could see it in the smallest of gestures, was beginning to lower her guard, and that was the problem. Alexander was becoming addicted to their conversations, to the way her eyes glimmered behind the mask when he said something clever, to the rare, reluctant laugh she gave when he made a cutting remark about one of the club's more ridiculous patrons, to the way she treated him, not as a duke or a lord, but as an equal. Something no woman in London had ever done. He was beginning to want more than words. And that was absolutely unacceptable. "Ravenscroft, are you listening?" Holloway's irritated voice snapped him back to reality. They were at White's, Alexander sitting with a glass of brandy he hadn't touched, pretending to care about a parliamentary discussion that could bore the dead. "Forgive me, Holloway." "Poor night's sleep," Alexander said. "So it seems." The man gave him a sharp look. "You've been scarce lately. Missed the Ashford ball, the Morrison dinner, even the Devonshire reception. Your mother's beginning to worry you've taken ill." A pang of guilt struck him. His mother, dear relentless woman. He'd neglected even the obligatory weekly visits, too consumed by a woman whose face he had never seen. "I've been occupied with estate matters," he said smoothly. "Estate matters?" Holloway laughed. "Ravenscroft, I've known you since Eton. You've never shown the slightest interest in estate management. What's really going on?" Nothing he could possibly explain. How could he admit he spent his nights in a secret club under a false name, talking to a masked woman who would likely cast him out if she knew who he really was? How could he say that for the first time in years he actually felt alive, and that it terrified him? "Just bored with the season," Alexander replied at last. Not entirely a lie. Same people, same conversations, same everything. "Forgive the interruption, gentlemen." Alexander turned and froze. Lady Ophelia Kingsley stood before them, accompanied by her father, the Earl of Kingsley. She wore a sea-green day gown that caught the light like water, her hair elegantly pinned, her posture impeccable. The perfect lady, the same woman he had met on the Rutherford Terrace nearly a month ago. "Lady Kingsley." He rose immediately, bowing. Earl, what a pleasant surprise. Duke of Ravenscroft. The Earl smiled warmly. My daughter insisted on accompanying me today. I had business with my solicitor, and I thought I might finally show her the interior of White's. She's rarely granted such a glimpse into our hallowed walls. Ophelia offered a polite smile, the kind Alexander now recognized as a mask. It's quite imposing, Your Grace. Imposing is a generous word for dreadfully dull, Alexander said before he could stop himself. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed her eyes, brief but unmistakable. Then for the first time she smiled with something almost real. Honesty, she said softly. How refreshing coming from a gentleman. The words hit him like déjà vu. Madame Scarlet had said something similar not many nights ago. A strange feeling twisted in his stomach. Lady Ophelia and Madame Scarlet shared that same quality, sharp intelligence wrapped in composure. Ravenscroft has little patience for pretenses, Holloway said with a laugh. It's both his most admirable and most troublesome trait. I can imagine, Ophelia replied, still watching Alexander with unsettling focus. Pretenses are exhausting, aren't they? Both to keep and to witness. There was something in her tone, something deeper than idle conversation should allow. Alexander studied her closely, truly looked, the way she clasped her hands, fingers intertwined tightly, as though holding something in place. The way her eyes scanned the room, not restlessly, but calculatingly. The subtle precision in her every motion, Lady Ophelia Kingsley was performing. Just like he was. Just like Madame Scarlet. Exhausting indeed, he said slowly, not breaking eye contact. Sometimes I wonder how many people in London are actually who they pretend to be. Fewer than we imagine, she answered, tilting her head slightly. Or perhaps more, depending on whether we see masks as deception or as necessary protection. His heart quickened. That wasn't small talk. That was a message, and for the first time a wild, impossible thought began to form. No, impossible. Lady Ophelia Kingsley was the epitome of propriety. Madame Scarlet ruled the underworld. They couldn't be the same woman, and yet, those eyes, that mind, that language. Come, dear, the Earl said, consulting his pocket watch. We mustn't keep the solicitor waiting. Of course, Father. She curtsied gracefully. Gentlemen, a pleasure. She turned to leave. But Alexander heard himself say, almost against his own will, Lady Kingsley? She paused, glanced back over her shoulder. I hope to see you again soon. Perhaps at the next social event I actually managed to attend? Something amusement? Recognition? Challenge? Flickered in her gaze. I hope so as well, Your Grace, she replied. Though social events can be predictable. The most interesting encounters often happen in the most unexpected places. And with that, she was gone, leaving Alexander standing there, brandy forgotten in his hand. A dangerous thought spreading like fire in his mind. Impossible. Completely impossible. But what if... Chapter 7. The Storm Between Them. Ophelia knew she was making a mistake. She knew it with the same certainty that she knew rain would wet her skin, and fire would burn it. And yet every night, she found herself waiting for him, waiting. For the moment Lord Adrian Vaughan would step through the doors of the Scarlet Veil and seek her. Eyes across the crowded room, something was changing between them. Something dangerous. Their conversations had grown longer, deeper. Not intimate in touch. They always kept a respectable distance. Always aware of the masks they wore, but intimate in ways that mattered more. He spoke of loneliness, the kind that came from carrying expectations he had never asked for. She, cautiously, shared fragments of her own golden cage, never enough to reveal her identity, but enough to let him see her soul. And with each word, each shared breath of honesty, Ophelia felt her defenses eroding, like cliffs worn down by a relentless storm. That night, a real storm raged over London. Thunder rolled against the windows of the Scarlet Veil, and rain drummed impatient fingers against the glass. The crowd was smaller than usual. Many of society's bravest had chosen not to risk their carriages on the mud-slick streets. But he was there. Of course he was. From the upper floor, Ophelia saw him speaking with Thomas, likely asking if she was present. His dark hair, slightly tousled from the rain, gave him a look less polished and far more human. Something in her chest tightened. She was growing attached. And attachment was a luxury Madame Scarlet could not afford. But Lady Ophelia Kingsley, she was learning, was far weaker than she liked to believe. She descended the staircase slowly, aware that he saw her. He always saw her. It was as if an invisible thread connected them, pulling her toward him no matter how hard she tried to resist. When she reached the bottom step, he was already waiting, bowing his head respectfully. "Madame Scarlet," he said, "I wondered if you would come tonight with the storm. This club does not close for weather." "Lord Vaughan." Her voice came out cooler than intended, a shield hastily raised. But he smiled. That knowing, quiet smile that told her he saw right through her armor. "Of course not. That would be inconsistent with your reputation for unwavering strength. Are you teasing me?" "Always." "Beat." He paused, eyes locked on hers through the masks. "It's one of the few things that still makes me feel alive." Her heart stumbled. "Lord Vaughan, Adrian," he corrected softly. His tone held no arrogance, only something almost pleading. "When we are alone, call me Adrian, please. She should refuse. She should keep the distance, the control, the walls, but the storm outside made everything feel sharper, more real, more urgent. As if the world might end before dawn, and this moment was all they had left to be honest. "Adrian," she repeated, tasting the name. It sounded dangerously intimate on her tongue. "Thank you." He extended his hand, not presumptuous, but inviting. "Will you walk with me?" "Only for a few moments. There's something I want, something I'd like to show you." Every rational thought screamed for her to decline, but she placed her gloved hand lightly on his sleeve. The gesture was proper, harmless, and yet every nerve in her body came alive at the contact. He led her not to the private rooms, but to a covered terrace behind the club, a hidden corner known only to a few. Rain fell like a silver curtain beyond them, but the roof kept them dry. The air smelled of wet earth and dangerous possibilities. "Look," he said quietly, gesturing beyond the rain. Ophelia followed his hand and gasped. Through the shimmering downpour, London glittered below them. Thousands of golden lights pierced the darkness, each one a secret, a life, a story. The city looked infinite, and heartbreakingly intimate. "It's beautiful like this," he murmured. "Raw, real, stripped of its polite masks, chaotic, dangerous, magnificent." Ophelia turned, looking not at the city but at him. "Why did you bring me here?" He faced her, and even behind the mask, the intensity of his gaze stole her breath. "Because I'm tired of pretending," he said softly. "Tired of playing meaningless games. Tired of speaking to people who never say what they truly think or feel. And I do?" Her voice trembled despite her effort to sound skeptical. "More than anyone I've ever met." He stepped closer. Not too close, still respectful, but close enough for her to feel his warmth through the space between them. "You see me," he said. "Not my title, not my fortune, not the face I present to the world. You see who I am, and I see you too." Pause, soft breath. Fear knifed through her. "You know nothing about me. I know you're lonely among the crowds. I know you built this empire because the society that should have welcomed you only ever suffocated you. I know you wear a mask not to hide, but to finally be free." His voice lowered to a near whisper. "And I know you're as tired as I am, of carrying the weight of perfection." Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. "Adrian, tell me I'm wrong." He lifted his hand, slowly, giving her every chance to stop him. When she didn't, he touched her chin, the only part of her face the mask did not cover. His gloved fingers were gentle against her skin. "Tell me you don't feel this too." She should lie. She should push him away, protect herself, protect everything she'd built. But she was so tired of pretending, of silence, of loneliness. "I can't," she whispered. The words tore from her like truth finally breaking free. "I can't tell you I don't feel it." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, a reverent gesture, as if she were something precious and fragile. She wasn't fragile. But right now, with rain pounding around them and her heart racing so violently he must have felt it, she felt breakable as glass. "Then don't," he murmured. "Just let me have this." He didn't kiss her. He didn't cross that final line. Their foreheads met, breath mingling, masks still in place but meaningless now. For a heartbeat, or 100, the world shrank to that terrace, to that shared breath, to that impossible, perfect moment suspended in time. Pause, slower tone. "I shouldn't want this," Ophelia confessed softly, her lips brushing his words without touching them. "I shouldn't want you." "Neither should I," he answered, voice low. "But I do. God help me. I do." Thunder cracked, closer now, a warning from the heavens. This was dangerous. This would end in ruin. Secrets like hers never allowed happy endings. But as he held her, as if she were the only solid thing left in a collapsing world, Ophelia allowed herself to believe, just for an instant, that maybe love could be stronger than secrets. Pause, fading breath. She pulled away, gently breaking the spell. "I have to go. I know." He didn't release her right away. His fingers lingered at her nape, memorizing the touch. "When can I see you again?" "Tomorrow," she heard herself say. "Tomorrow night." He smiled. The real one. The rare one that transformed his entire face. "Tomorrow, then." Ophelia turned and stepped back inside. She had not left her reputation behind. Not her secret, but something far more dangerous. She had left a piece of her heart in the hands of a man who did not know her real name. And when he found out, because men like Adrian always found out, that heart would surely break. Yet that night, as the storm rattled London and she climbed the stairs to her office with trembling hands and a racing heart, Ophelia allowed herself one mercy. She did not think about tomorrow. She only allowed herself to feel. Chapter 8. The Beginning of the Fall. Alexander knew he was lost. Completely, irrevocably lost. He had spent the entire night awake, replaying every second of that moment on the terrace. Her touch, their shared breath, the way his entire body trembled when their foreheads met. He had wanted to kiss her. God, how he had wanted it. But something, respect, restraint, perhaps the faint awareness that a kiss would shatter any illusion that this was merely fascination, had stopped him. Now, sitting in his library at 9 a.m, coffee untouched, and letters of estate management ignored on the desk, Alexander faced an inconvenient truth. He was in love with a woman whose face he had never seen, whose real name he did not know, and who would likely destroy him if she ever discovered that Adrian Vaughn was as much a fabrication as her velvet mask. "Alexander? Are you even listening?" He blinked, refocusing on the elegant figure of his mother, Catherine Harrington, the Dowager Duchess of Ravenscroft, who looked at him with equal parts concern and irritation. "Forgive me, Mother. I was distracted." "Clearly?" She sighed, settling more comfortably on the damask sofa with the practiced grace of a woman born to it. "As I was saying, Lady Ophelia Kingsley will be joining us for dinner on Friday. Her mother mentioned that she's shown interest in getting to know you better, after your brief encounter at White's." The name hit him like a blow to the chest. Lady Ophelia Kingsley. The perfect, untouchable lady he had met a few times in society. The one who had always seemed strangely familiar. Those intelligent eyes, that way of speaking in layers, the suspicion he'd been denying for days, the one too absurd to even entertain, returned in full force. "Mother," he said slowly, "what do you know of Lady Kingsley? Beyond the obvious things, fortune, lineage, reputation?" Catherine looked faintly surprised. She's an exceptional young woman, Alexander. Intelligent. I've heard she reads philosophy and economics, which is rare for her circle. She's refused 17 marriage proposals, which of course fuels gossip. Some call her too proud. Others say she's waiting for true love. She studied him closely. Why do you ask? Curiosity. The lie tasted like ash. Then your curiosity will be satisfied on Friday, Catherine continued, smiling approvingly. Ophelia is 27 now. Most women her age have long been wed, but she seems determined to live life on her own terms. Her own terms, just like Madame Scarlet, who had built a shadow empire defying every rule society imposed on women. Alexander felt the ground tilt beneath him. I have to go, he said abruptly, rising to his feet. Go? Alexander, it's 9 in the morning and you're still in your robe. But he was already halfway to the door, mind spinning. He needed proof. He needed certainty. And there was only one man in London whose web of information rivaled his own. An hour later, he was seated in the discreet office of James Whitmore, a private investigator who specialized in the secrets of the nobility, problems too delicate for the courts or the police. Your Grace, Whitmore said with a polite bow. An unexpected honor. How may I assist you? I need information, Alexander replied curtly. Discreet, fast, and absolute. He placed a heavy pouch of coins on the desk. Lady Ophelia Kingsley, I want to know everything. Where she goes, who she meets, any behavior that might seem unusual for a woman of her position. Whitmore opened the pouch, weighed it, and nodded thoughtfully. I can have preliminary findings in 2 days. I need them by tomorrow night. That is, double. He placed another pouch beside the first. If you find something unusual, he added quietly, there's triple waiting. Greed overcame hesitation. By noon tomorrow, Your Grace. When Alexander left the office, he felt like both a traitor and a man justified. If Ophelia and Madame Scarlet truly were one and the same, he had to know. Not just for himself, but for her. Because if he, with his limited resources, could uncover her secret, others could too. And if the truth ever came to light, she would be ruined. Yet as his carriage rolled through the streets of London, guilt pressed down on him like a physical weight. He was investigating the woman he had begun to love. He was betraying the fragile trust she had only just begun to give him, and worse, a part of him desperately hoped he was wrong. Because if he was right, it meant that Madame Scarlet, the woman he loved, the woman who saw him like no one else, was Lady Ophelia Kingsley. And if she was Ophelia, had she already discovered who he was? Had she realized that Adrian Vaughan was a lie? That the man she'd been meeting in the shadows was the Duke of Ravenscroft himself? Had she been laughing at him all this time behind her mask? Because if he had deceived her about his name, she had deceived him about her entire existence, was it that night? For the first time in weeks, Alexander did not go to the Scarlet Vale. He stayed home, drinking alone in his library, trying to convince himself that he was doing the right thing, that uncovering the truth was necessary. That she would understand. But deep down, in the most honest corner of his heart, he already knew. When Madame Scarlet discovered what he had done, when she realized he had doubted her, had not trusted her enough to simply ask, she would never forgive him, and perhaps he wouldn't deserve forgiveness. Chapter 9. The Mask Returns. Ophelia knew something was wrong the moment she woke. It wasn't intuition. It wasn't a mystic whisper of woman's instinct. It was the cold, practiced awareness of someone who had built an empire by staying 3 steps ahead of every threat. Thomas was waiting in her private office at the Scarlet Vale, and the expression on his face, genuine worry, was one she had seen only a handful of times. Madame Scarlet, he said quietly, closing the door behind him. We have a problem. She sat behind her mahogany desk, forcing her posture into composure even as her heart began to pound. Explain. James Whitmore, the private investigator. Thomas hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. One of our contacts just informed me that he was hired yesterday morning to investigate. Lady Ophelia Kingsley. The world stopped. For a heartbeat, maybe two, Ophelia couldn't breathe. Couldn't think, only feel. A cold, visceral fear. The kind she hadn't known in years. Someone was investigating her. Someone suspected. Who? Her voice came out rough. Who hired Whitmore? Thomas shook his head. Our contact couldn't confirm. But the payment was extraordinary. Whoever it was has significant resources. And urgency. Significant resources. Urgency. And interest specifically in Lady Ophelia Kingsley. Her mind raced through possibilities. Creditors? Impossible. Her finances were flawless. Rejected suitors seeking revenge? Perhaps. But after 17 proposals over years, why now? Unless… Adrian. The thought hit her like a slap. Adrian Vaughn, who had not appeared the night before for the first time since their first meeting. No message, no word, nothing. And now, the very next morning, a wealthy client had hired an investigator to dig into Lady Ophelia Kingsley. Coincidence? Ophelia didn't believe in coincidences. How long before Whitmore finds something? Her tone was calm, unnervingly calm, detached from the panic curling inside her. Days, maybe less, Thomas replied. He's good, madame. Very good. Ophelia closed her eyes. Years of meticulous caution. Of living two lives in perfect surgical precision. And now, because she had allowed emotion to blur her judgment, because she had fallen in love with a man who was likely betraying her, everything she had built was at risk of collapsing. Strengthen surveillance, she ordered finally, opening her eyes. Her voice was steady again, colder. I want to know every move Whitmore makes, everyone he speaks to, every scrap of information he collects, and find out who hired him. Whatever it costs. Yes, madame. Thomas bowed and left, closing the door softly behind him. Ophelia sat still for a long time, staring at that closed door, her mind spinning like a wheel on fire. Adrian, his absence, the timing, the investigation. It couldn't be coincidence. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe Adrian had nothing to do with it. Maybe there was an innocent reason for his absence. Illness, family duty, anything. But Ophelia Kingsley hadn't built the Scarlet Veil on optimism. She had built it on paranoia, precision, and an unrelenting expectation of betrayal. And right now, the worst possibility was the only one she could afford to believe. If Adrian Vaughn truly was investigating her, she needed to know why. She needed to understand what he suspected, what he already knew, and what he intended to do with that knowledge. Then she needed to decide, confront him, or remove him as a threat before he could do real damage. The second option was safer. More logical. Ophelia had ways of making problems. Disappear, not violently. She wasn't a monster, but efficiently. People could be persuaded to leave London. Quietly. Permanently. But the mere thought of doing that to him, of using against Adrian, the same tools she used on her enemies, made her stomach twist because she loved him. God help her, she loved him, and he was betraying her. She remained at her desk until dusk, staring out at London as it came alive with lamplight. Each flicker of flame represented a life continuing blissfully unaware of the private war consuming hers. Somewhere out there, Adrian, or whoever he truly was, waited for the information that could destroy her. Elsewhere, her sisters laughed beside their husbands, her parents dined peacefully, and London's high society carried on its glittering dance of appearances and lies. And she sat here, alone, facing the truth that everything she had built, everything she had protected, might fall apart because she had committed the most foolish, most human mistake of all. She had believed that someone could love her for who she really was. When she finally stood, she was no longer the woman who had once dreamed of love on a rain-soaked terrace. She was Madame Scarlet again, cold, calculating, unyielding. If Adrian Vaughn wanted to play dangerous games, She would teach him exactly who he was dealing with, and if her heart had to break in the process, well, broken hearts were a small price to pay for survival. Chapter 10: The Truth Beneath the Mask. The envelope arrived at noon, exactly as promised. Alexander held it for several minutes before opening it, as if the weight of the paper could somehow prepare him for the weight of the truth inside. When he finally broke the seal and began to read, the world he knew collapsed. Lady Ophelia Kingsley maintains a strictly conventional routine during the day: social visits, family obligations, carriage rides with her sisters. However, nocturnal movements are irregular. Witnesses report a discreet carriage leaving the Kingsley estate around 10 o'clock, 3 to 4 times a week, always through the servants' entrance. Destination: the Mayfair district, near an establishment known only as the Scarlet Veil. Alexander stopped reading. His hands trembled. He forced himself to continue. Further investigation reveals that the Scarlet Veil is an underground club of significant reputation among the aristocracy. Its proprietor remains entirely anonymous, known only as Madame Scarlet. The club has operated for approximately 5 years, coinciding precisely with Lady Kingsley's age of majority and her gaining financial independence. The words blurred. He dropped the report onto the desk, rose to his feet, and walked to the window. He breathed. He tried to understand. Ophelia. Lady Ophelia Kingsley, the diamond of the season, the perfect heiress his mother wanted him to pursue, was Madame Scarlet, the masked woman he had fallen in love with. The mistress of London's most dangerous secret world, she had known. From the very beginning, she had known who he was. The realization struck like a fist to the gut. While he had introduced himself as Adrian Vaughan, believing himself clever, believing he was hiding his truth, she had known him. She had seen his face, read his name in papers, heard the gossip about the Duke of Ravenscroft, and she had let him believe he was deceiving her, that his disguise was flawless, when in truth, she'd been watching. Silent behind her mask, every conversation, every confession, every moment when he had spoken of loneliness, of duty, of the suffocating weight of nobility, she had known exactly who was speaking, and still she never said it. Never once did she whisper, "I know who you are, Alexander. Why? Why keep the lie alive?" The answer came cruelly fast, because she had been playing him, using him, maybe even planning to blackmail him. A duke, sneaking into a forbidden club under a false identity. It would make delicious scandal. A scandal worth a fortune. But then he remembered, her trembling under his touch. The sound of her breath when their foreheads met. The raw honesty in her voice when she whispered, "I shouldn't want you." That hadn't been performance. It couldn't have been, unless she was so brilliant a liar that even her heartbeat obeyed her deceit. Alexander picked up the report again, forcing himself to read to the end. Additional note: Lady Kingsley appears to maintain her own network of informants. "I was warned this morning that my investigation is being investigated. Exercise extreme caution, Your Grace. This is no ordinary woman, and her resources are substantial." Of course she knew. Ophelia, Madame Scarlet, had not built an empire by being careless. She knew he had investigated her, and by now, she likely despised him for it. The irony was brutal. He had investigated her because he couldn't bear the doubt, because he needed to know if the two women who haunted him were one and the same. And in doing so, in choosing suspicion over trust, he had destroyed the fragile truth they might have shared. Alexander looked at the clock. 4 in the afternoon. In 6 hours, the Scarlet Veil would open its doors. She would be there, masked, regal, untouchable. And when their eyes met, she would not see Adrian Vaughan, the man who had whispered vulnerability. She would see Alexander Harrington, the Duke who had betrayed her. He should stay away. He should let the story end quietly. Marry a respectable lady, produce heirs, and live the life everyone expected of him. But as he stood there, staring out at London through the tall windows of his library. Alexander realized he couldn't. He couldn't let her go without knowing. He had to tell her the truth. All of it. No more masks. No more lies, even if she hated him. Even if she destroyed him. Even if she used everything she knew to ruin him utterly. He had to see her again. He had to look into her eyes and ask, was any of it real? Or had he fallen in love with a ghost she had created just for him? At 10 that night, Alexander stepped across the threshold of the Scarlet Veil for the last time. He wore his Venetian mask, not as disguise, but as farewell. He was no longer Adrian Vaughan, the Scottish heir. He was simply a man walking toward his own undoing. The club was alive, laughter, silk, and secrets filling the air. His heart pounded like a drum against his ribs. And then he saw her. Madame Scarlet, Ophelia, descended the staircase with her usual grace. The scarlet mask gleamed beneath candlelight. Her posture was flawless. But her eyes were different. He saw pain there, and fury, and the kind of defensive coldness born from heartbreak. She knew. She knew he had investigated her. She knew he had discovered her secret, and in that single glance she told him everything he feared. You hurt me. And I will never forgive you. Alexander walked toward her like a man walking to the gallows. Slow, deliberate, resigned. When he reached the base of the stairs, she stopped midway, looking down at him. The distance between them, just a few steps, felt like an ocean. Madame Scarlet, he said softly, voice rough. Please, I need to speak with you. There is nothing to discuss, Lord Vaughan. Her tone was pure ice. Unless you wish to terminate your membership. In that case, Thomas will assist you. Ophelia. The name escaped him. Part plea, part confession, part surrender. The entire room froze. No one used real names in the Scarlet Veil, ever. It was the one rule that could not be broken, and Alexander had just shattered it. Lord Vaughan, she said at last, her voice low and lethal. Follow me, now. She descended the last steps and passed by him without a glance, expecting obedience, and Alexander followed, knowing that the next few moments might decide everything between them. The truth at last would have its reckoning. Chapter 11. No More Masks. The door to Private Room 7 closed with a sound too final for such a small space, like the lid of a coffin. Ophelia turned, each movement measured, every muscle held tight. She did not remove her mask, not yet. That would be a satisfaction he hadn't earned. Alexander, no longer Adrian, never Adrian again, stood near the door, as if afraid she'd cast him out before he could speak. Good. He should be afraid. You used my name, she said, voice low and dangerous. In the main hall, in front of patrons. You broke the most sacred rule of this establishment. I know. No excuse. No defense. Just acknowledgement. Do you understand what that means? The risk you put me in? She stepped forward, fury finally cracking the ice. 5 years? 5 years building this, protecting my identity, making sure no one could connect Lady Ophelia Kingsley to this place. And you, in one moment of what? Desperation? Selfishness? Set a match to it. Then let me do the one honest thing left. He raised his hands to the Venetian mask and removed it in a single deliberate motion, leaving his face utterly bare. Ophelia went still. The world tilted. That face, she knew it. From balls, from drawing rooms, from the meeting at White's where he'd talked of masks and prisons, Alexander Harrington. The Duke of Ravenscroft. The charming, laughing man who melted half of London. The same man who had stood on a rain-slicked terrace and spoken to her of loneliness as if it were a language only they shared. Adrian Vaughan was Alexander Harrington. You. The word scraped out, the axis of her world shifting too fast to follow. You're the Duke of Ravenscroft. Yes. He watched her absorb it, his face emptied of pretense. Alexander Harrington. No disguises between us now, Ophelia. No lies. Explain it to me, please. I want to understand. I need to understand. Her name and his voice, from that familiar, impossible face, cut clean through her armor. All this time, she had been speaking to a duke, that duke, and never knew. I didn't. She shook her head, thoughts unraveling to smoke. I didn't know you were. Don't lie. Not now. Frustration roughened his tone, but pain lived underneath. You run this club by knowing exactly who walks through the door. You told me yourself. Knowledge is power. Don't pretend you didn't investigate me, that you didn't learn who Adrian Vaughn really was. I did investigate. The words broke louder than she intended. Of course I did. And I learned that Lord Adrian Vaughn of the Highlands didn't exist. A false identity. But I did not learn who you truly were. She stepped closer, accusation rising to meet his. You covered your tracks. Perfectly. No direct ties to your real life. No trail that led to Alexander Harrington, Duke of Ravenscroft. Surprise flared across his features. Genuine, unguarded. You didn't know? No. Anger and hurt bit into her voice. What do you think this is? That I keep dossiers matching every masked man to his baptismal name? I can smell a lie, yes, but I can't conjure your truths from thin air. Her eyes burned. So don't accuse me of playing you when I was just as blind as you were. More, perhaps, because you at least suspected that Lady Ophelia and Madame Scarlet might be the same. I didn't even know I was speaking with a man I'd met in society. Ophelia. He reached out. She stepped back. You hired Whitmore, she said, bitterness like iron. You paid to have me followed, watched, confirmed. Yes. No evasion. No sugar. Why? The question tore loose. Why not simply ask? Why not trust me enough to ask? If I had asked, would you have told me the truth? He moved a fraction nearer, voice low and unwavering. If I came, as Adrian or Alexander, it doesn't matter, and said, Are you Madame Scarlet? Would you have answered honestly? She opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth tasted like ash. Probably not. Exactly. No triumph in him, only sorrow, because we are both prisoners of our secrets, Ophelia. We built our walls so high we forgot how to climb them. She was silent, because he was right, and that hurt. I was terrified, he said, voice suddenly raw. I met Lady Ophelia Kingsley, untouchable, brilliant, too brilliant, and she fascinated me. Then I met Madame Scarlet, fierce, impossible, sovereign, and I fell in love. When I began to suspect you were both, I panicked. Because if you were, then you were everything. Everything I wanted and never hoped to find. And that frightened me more than I can name. So you betrayed me. Not a question, a wound. So I betrayed you, he answered, the remorse in his tone unfeigned. Because I was a coward, I chose certainty over faith. I didn't trust you to tell me when you were ready, if you ever would. And now I know you truly didn't know who I was. Which makes my betrayal worse. You had a reason, a secret that could destroy you. I had only fear. Silence descended, heavy, shared, aching. Two people who had lied and hidden and hurt each other while learning, helplessly, how to love. I should have told you, Ophelia said at last, small-voiced, about being Lady Kingsley. When I realized Adrian Vaughn was a fiction, I should have confronted you and forced the truth into the light. But I was afraid. She looked down at her hands. Afraid that if you knew who I truly was, not just the name but all of it, Lady Kingsley and Madame Scarlet together, you'd see a monster. A monster? He stepped closer. She didn't retreat. Ophelia, you are the most extraordinary person I have ever known, not despite what you are, but because of it. How can you say that? Tears slipped free, unchecked. You don't even know me. Not whole. You know pieces. Ophelia on a terrace, Scarlet in a club. Not the woman who must be both at once. The woman who lies to everyone, every day, who built an empire in shadow while pretending to be perfect in daylight. He lifted a hand slowly, telegraphing intent, giving her time to stop him. When she didn't, his fingers rested against the edge of the scarlet velvet. Then let me know you. All of you. No masks. No lies. A breath. May I? She should say no. Distance was safety, revelation, surrender, but she was so very tired she nodded. He removed the mask with reverence, as if unwrapping a relic. And for the first time they stood face to face with nothing between them. Alexander Harrington and Ophelia Kingsley, not Adrian and Madame Scarlet. Not roles, not performances, just them. There you are, he whispered, studying her like he meant to remember her forever. Ophelia. All of you. All of me, she echoed, voice breaking. All the lies, all the masks, all the chaos I pretend is under control. I see you, he said, steady. I see you, and I'm not leaving. Why? The word pleaded. Why aren't you running? You should. Anyone sensible would. Because I love you. No flourish, no armor, only truth. I love the lady who pretends to be less than she is so fragile men won't break. I love the mistress of a hidden empire who rules with a velvet-gloved iron will. I love the woman between them who is exhausted from pretending. I love all your parts, Ophelia, even the ones you think must be hidden. A sound escaped her, ugly, desperate, the sound of someone who has held back too long. I love you too, she sobbed. And I hate that I do. I hate it because it means you can destroy me, because you already did, when you chose suspicion over trust. I know. He drew her into his arms, and this time she let herself fall. If I could go back, I would do it differently. I would ask. I would trust. I can't change what I did. All I can do is promise I will do better. That I will. Never again choose fear over faith. Never again betray what we're building. How can I believe you? She asked against his chest, his heartbeat racing to match hers. How do I trust again? You can't, he said, brutally honest. Not yet. Not today. He eased back enough to meet her eyes. I'm asking for a chance to rebuild it. Stone by stone, day by day. Let me prove I can be worthy. Of you, of your love, of your trust. I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight. I haven't earned it. I'm asking for the chance to try. Ophelia looked at him. Not the mask, not the legend, but the man. Part of her wanted to banish him to save herself from further hurt. Another part, larger, truer, remembered every quiet conversation, every fragile confession, every moment when, despite the lies, they had been real together. A chance, she whispered at last. But no more lies. Never again. If you want to know something about me, Alexander, ask. And I will do the same. Promise, he said, cupping her face, lowering his brow to hers. The terrace, remembered, but transformed. No more masks. Not between us. No more masks, she breathed, letting the closeness, the warmth, the terrifying reality wash through her. When he kissed her, finally, inevitably, it wasn't fireworks or surrender. It was gentle. An apology. A vow. Two broken people learning the shape of a possible future in the dark. They parted, and she kept her eyes closed for one heartbeat more, memorizing the feel of it. When she opened them, his gaze held worship and fear, the fear of losing her. Ask me, she said softly. You have a question. I can see it. Ask. He hesitated, then, how? How did you build all this? The club, the network, the double life, without anyone discovering you? She almost smiled. Meticulous planning, healthy paranoia, and the simple truth that society sees what it wants to see. No one expected Lady Ophelia Kingsley capable of this, so no one looked. She paused. My turn. Why Adrian Vaughn? Why invent a man instead of coming as yourself? Because Alexander Harrington comes with expectations, he answered. He's watched, judged, catalogued. Adrian Vaughn was free. Just a man, not a duke. He could speak to you without the gravity of my title crushing every word. "But you are your title," she said gently. "As I am both Lady Kingsley and Madame Scarlet. We don't get to cut away the parts that are inconvenient. Then we learn to carry all of them," he said. "Together." "Together," she echoed. And for the first time since Whitmore's name had passed Thomas's lips, Ophelia felt something other than fear and pain. She felt hope. Epilogue: All the Faces We Keep. Spring rain blurred London into a wash of silver gray, and Ophelia stood by the tall window of Ravenscroft Library watching it fall, one hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach, where a quiet secret was beginning to grow. 6 months of marriage. A year since that first night at the Scarlet Vale, when a masked stranger had shattered the calm she'd built like glass around herself. Now, with a wedding ring warm on her finger and a new life blooming within her, she finally understood what had been missing all those years. It had never been power. She'd always had that. Nor freedom. She had carved that out with her own blood and will. What had been missing was belonging, Azgekal. Thomas now ran the Scarlet Vale flawlessly, though she and Alexander still visited. On rare evenings, always masked, rediscovering the thrill of two strangers speaking in whispers and shadows. Except now, when he touched her through velvet and silk, there was no fear of discovery, only certainty. They belonged to one another, in every world they inhabited. Alexander watched her from his armchair, eyes soft. He noticed the way her hand lingered on her stomach, a new gesture she hadn't yet realized she made. He suspected. No, he knew. He knew her every unconscious motion, every habit. The Duchess of Ravenscroft was carrying a Harrington air, and the thought filled him with equal parts terror and awe. He would wait for her to tell him, in her own time. Perhaps tonight, when they donned their masks once more and returned to the club that was no longer hers to manage, but would always be part of who she was. He had learned to love all her selves, the Duchess who presided over formal dinners with the composure of a queen, the woman who still played cards with masked lords and argued strategy with Thomas over a glass of brandy, the wife who challenged him over breakfast with political debate and undid him with laughter and kisses when the sun went down. She hadn't surrendered her sharp mind, her independence, or that shadow-blooming part of her soul. And he had never asked her to. Her estates remained in her name. Her fortune, untouched and fully her own. Her decisions, respected as equal to his. Because living two lives, light and shadow, was its own kind of heroism. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, coming up behind her, his hand covering hers over the gentle curve of her stomach. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, realizing he knew. "You know," she whispered. "I always know." He kissed the side of her neck. "Are you happy?" "Terrified," she admitted softly. "But yes, happy." He turned her in his arms, studying the face he had once thought he'd lost. "Shall we go to the club tonight? Celebrate?" She laughed, that sound he adored, a blend of mischief and joy. "Celebrate my pregnancy in a clandestine club? Alexander, you're incorrigible." I learned from the best. He could already. Picture it. The two of them masked again, her laughter glimmering like candlelight, his fingers brushing her hand beneath the table. Both of them keeping one more secret, this one sweet and welcome, a promise instead of a lie. Outside, the storm would pass. It always did. Inside that library, where everything had begun in loneliness and rain, two survivors of their own wars had not only found each other, but were creating something new. A life, a legacy, a peace. And when they stepped once more through the red curtained doors of the Scarlet Vale that night, it wouldn't be to hide who they were. It would be to celebrate all the versions of themselves they had chosen to keep alive. Because true love, they had learned, doesn't demand that we abandon the pieces of who we are. It simply asks that we find someone brave enough to love every one of them,